So glad that you could be with us here today to have this very important discussion. I want to bring in Hoover, which now that's burned in my brain, Gary Hoover, Department Chair from the University of Oklahoma, and Omari Swinton, Department Chair from Howard, to continue the conversation. Thank you both for being here today. So the questions are flooding in, and I'm going to do my best to synthesize the questions that are similar and get to as many as we can. I will note, if we don't get to your question today during this live session, we will follow up with you directly via email. So lots of comments about what you were saying, Omari, around students not knowing the power, right, of economics. And so this person notes that, in fact, from their perspective, students might even be discouraged from studying economics, evidenced by AP course taking. It indicates that there's an interest or a problem with interest starting in high school. So the question is, how do we as individuals in the profession, or maybe even organizations like the AEA, how do we do a better job of outreach to younger students? So do we start downstream? And if so, how do we do that?
So I guess I'll take this one first. I think across the board, we have to get people's experience in economics to be better. If someone who took an economics class hates it, and they see someone who might be interested in economics, they can say, oh, don't take that class. And a simple way is just to improve people's experience in principles. When people just take that one class and they talk about economics, they'll talk about it glowingly. And that would be a simple thing that everyone who's an economics professor could do, is making sure that people see the value of economics as a degree.
Hoove, do you have any comments to add there?
Well, I think it goes back to something that Omari mentioned during the discussion part, in that economics is actually really broad, and we shouldn't try to narrow the areas that it can be used to approach. So that if we're talking about AP, if we're talking about reaching people who are younger at the high school level, all you really need to do is ask them, what's on your mind? And then as they articulate the things that are on their mind, say, hey, you know what? Economics has an answer for that. That's the way that you broaden participation and appeal. When someone says, I wonder about climate change, and then we can say, you know what? Economics has some research being done on that topic. Or when people say, I wonder about the political environment that we live in now, and we say, hey, there's an area called political economy. If we can show that almost every area in your daily life is touched by economics, and there's an answer that we have, that's how you broaden the appeal, especially for people who don't see the obvious connection.
Okay, great. Thank you both. So I'm going to try to jam two questions together because they're sort of similar. But we're getting lots of questions about, practical ways to make the classroom and the course more inviting, more welcoming. And then in particular, I guess as a part two of that, are there discussions or activities that you've used to achieve that objective? Who would you like to kick us off?
Oh, sure. I was waiting for Omari. I didn't know if he wanted to go first. So one of the things that I like to do, especially in my introductory courses, is I run some stuff that is basically, you would call them experimental or games, where I get active participation from the students in there. So I did this piece of research on, this was a few years ago, on something called comparison. And what I would do was I would put one group at an unfair disadvantage on purpose. And then that would allow us to talk about discrimination, because the random group that was being discriminated against, they weren't being treated fairly. you do those types of exercises in class, and that invites a broader discussion for people who find that those types of things have happened in the real world too, and so then they can bring it back just from the class. A lot of this stuff, there's the Council on Economic Education. If you were to go to their website, I believe, and don't quote me on this, I believe they're out of Boston. They have just a ton of materials built at basically the introductory college course on down to the AP high school stuff. Those exercises, those practical exercises work really well in getting people involved and seeing the practicality of the profession.
So, I mean, Hoover gave a great resource, but you know, there's tons of resources where you could find this kind of information if you're interested, and especially those of us who have those large, the large principles classes, we find it's most useful when we have sort of breakdown sections where you could talk to students in a smaller group so they can feel more connection to the classes. And those labs are recitations hours for economics where students can't get the individual attention they can't get in the big class. Classes are important.
Okay, thank you for that. So we have a handful of questions around mentorship. And so my question is, how can the folks in the audience more broadly promote programs like the summer program? And are there other ways, other activities to make sure that we're reaching out as wide and as far as possible to invite people to the field?
So I'll start with this one. I think a lot of people don't realize that to be a good mentor, you actually have to put time and effort to make sure that you're giving the person you're mentoring what they need to be successful. And so there's not really this one size fit all role that you have to play as a mentor. Everybody you mentor in the field might need something different from you. And it has to be the willingness of the person who's a mentor to help people along their journeys through economics. And it takes dedication and a willingness to look for the training that's out there to actually be a mentor, to be a mentor. It's not something that, oh, I wrote a letter of recommendation for the student, I'm helping them out. It's more like, what are your life goals? What kind of research do you do? Do you want to be an academic, or do you want to go into the private sector, right? And all those kind of questions lead you to giving different advice based on that student's feedback. So I think an important thing about mentoring is to make sure that people who are the mentors get trained on how to provide effective mentoring.
Train the trainer. I like that.
Well, let me jump in. So if you go to the American Economics Association, right, just type in American Economics Association, you're going to find their website. On their website, they have a resources page dedicated to the resources and best practices around minority mentorship, right? It also has access to a lot of tools. One of the things that has to happen, as Omari correctly pointed out about mentorship, is there are just not enough minority scholars to do the mentorship. So if this is going to work, it is going to have to be non-minority scholars because we just don't have the numbers. So try the American Economics Association website. I see I'm running out of time. So try the website. There are tons of resources, practical resources that you can reach there.
I want to thank you both. And for those questions that we didn't get to, we will follow up with you directly. Thank you, Hoove. Thank you, Omari, for sharing your wisdom with the audience. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.